has definitely established a special bond with his big cats.
See, you never can do this with someone who is not happy and content. I feel that I do not want to change them at all. That's the beauty. That's what attracts me, is that adventure, is that danger, with underlying danger all the time. But if you understand and if you start learning it, you don't need any of that. You can make him do whatever you want him to do. But then there are characteristics where you can never change.
You want them to be tigers.
I want them to be tigers.
Siegfried and Roy caused more harm to tigers than any other two people in the history of humankind, in my opinion.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sid, and in today's video I am going to be talking about Siegfried and Roy. They were the biggest private breeder of white tigers and white lions in the United States, but they were more well known for their very famous act in Las Vegas that incorporated those big cats. It was so famous that it was parodied on The Simpsons. But that parody turned out to be more of a prediction because 10 years later it came true. Siegfried Fishbucker and Roy Horn both believe that Roy had a special bond with their big cats, to the point where they believed that they just saw Roy as another tiger.
I have this bond with my animals because I'm just like them. Maybe I have been a tiger before in my life.
The tigers, all the animals, they think Roy was also a tiger.
What was the moment at which you first heard an animal thinking?
Actually, all my life. I think it is something I've been born with.
Together, but Roy, he has something what I still don't have, and I still don't understand the communication what he has with the animal. Yeah. He walks on the street and the dogs follow him.
Despite supposedly having a deep bond and trust with these big cats, that bond ended up being broken. But before I go any further, I just want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, Free Cash. Free Cash is an easy way to earn money by playing mobile games and completing surveys. And we spend so much spare time on our phones these days, so you may as well turn your free time into free cash. It already has a large community of people earning a little extra on the side, and they've approved of it so much that it has a 4.8 on Trustpilot. Just remember to enable app tracking so any earnings are properly credited. It is super easy to set up, and it personalizes things based on if you want to play mobile games or complete surveys. I choose to play games because you can keep hitting checkpoints and earn more money every day you play. I personally like to play a game called Mirage because it involves animals and is fun, so it is a win-win. The withdrawal of your earnings is also super easy. I withdraw using PayPal because that is the one I'm most comfortable with, but they have a bunch of other withdrawal options like bank transfer, gift cards, Bitcoin, and much more. So if you would like to start earning, sign up using my link in the description box, pinned comment, or by scanning the QR code on the screen, and receive a bonus $5 after completing your first offer. And just so you know, the interface may vary slightly by country, but the process stays exactly the same. Once again, thank you to Free Cash for sponsoring this video. It really helps me and the channel out. So on October 3rd, 2003, Siegfried and Roy were doing their act in Las Vegas, which involved illusions and big cats, and everything was going smoothly. As usual, 45 minutes into the show, the room goes dark and a spotlight is placed on Roy. That is because there is a lull in the show where he takes a moment to introduce one of their big cats to the audience. And that night, Roy wasn't sure which big cat he was going to introduce. He considered using a new cub because he thought it would be cute, but Chris Lawrence, one of the animal handlers, had a different idea. It also happened to be Roy's birthday, and a lot of his friends were in the audience, so Chris suggested that he take out one of the more impressive, more experienced big cats. That big cat was a white tiger named Manticore, which is a Persian name that translates to man-eater. Roy agreed with Chris's suggestion and guided Manticore out onto the stage. There's a spot on stage where Roy usually gets Manticore to stop and do a couple of actions for the audience, but on that night, Manticore did not stop. So while Roy was trying to maneuver Manticore back to where he should have stopped, he got unsettled. Roy attempted to discipline him by bumping him on the top of his head with his microphone, but that only unsettled Manticore further, and he nipped at Roy's forearm but didn't break the skin. After that, Roy fell backward.
And Roy went back and he slipped. He tripped.
Oh, he fell.
He fell.
Then what?
Manticore then grabbed Roy by the neck, dragged him across the stage and into the backstage area. Emergency services were immediately called.
We need paramedics at the Siegfried and Roy Theater. Roy Warren has been bitten by a tiger.
4 minutes later, an ambulance arrived, but during the 4 minutes prior, blood was gushing from Roy's injuries. He had 2 puncture wounds below his hairline and 2 lacerations on the front of his neck. Siegfried and their manager Bernie Eumann revealed soon after the attack that as Roy was laying there and on his way to the hospital, he wanted to make sure no harm came to Manticore.
So the only thing he said, the only thing you heard him say was, don't harm the animal.
Don't harm.
And in the ambulance, he also said, Manticore is a great cat. Make sure no harm comes to Manticore.
When he reached the hospital, there was a high likelihood he would never find out what happened to Manticore. He was hanging on by a thread, and the doctors were working on him for 2 minutes before he flatlined. But before this abrupt end to their act, they had thousands of other shows underneath their belt beforehand. Both Siegfried and Roy were born in Germany, and their fathers served in Hitler's army. Roy's father died in the war, and Siegfried's survived, but it had a pretty significant impact on him. So as a way to escape these tragedies, Siegfried turned to learning magic, and Roy turned to caring for animals. Roy volunteered at a nearby zoo and was drawn to the big cats. He initially wanted to bond with the tigers, but they were too aggressive, so he got closer to a cheetah named Chico. It wasn't long before he was able to enter the cage with Chico and take him on walks. In 1959, Siegfried had gotten so good at his magic and illusions, he was hired as entertainment on a cruise ship. At the same time, Roy wanted some adventure and independence, so he got a job as a bellboy on the same cruise ship. Roy took Chico on one of their walks and never took him back. He instead smuggled him in a laundry bag onto the cruise ship. Siegfried took notice of Roy and asked him if he could help him with his magic act. Roy agreed and suggested that they use Chico in some capacity. They used him, and while the audience loved it, the captain did not, and he fired them both. This bonded them further, and they continued to perform together. They worked on other cruise ships and in nightclubs, and in 1964, they were asked by Grace Kelly to come and perform in Monte Carlo in France. It was during that performance where Chico went off script and jumped into the audience.
He didn't jump on the top of the illusion, he jumped right into the audience, went by Princess Grace and Prince Ken, and went into the kitchen. Well,
this made your act. Huh? This was the big hit.
It was the first standing ovation, you know, that's the count.
They thought that was the act. Yes. Weren't you a little panicky when the cheetah ran into the audience?
Sure, but you have to make it look like it belonged to the act, you know.
You faked it.
Yes.
Well,
ever since that performance, it was all up from there. They were then scouted to add their act to a show in Las Vegas. They performed at a couple of different venues, but regardless of where they were adding more animals to their act. Chico passed away, so they purchased 2 lapjags, which were a cross between a leopard and a jaguar.
He has the head of a jaguar, and the back part is actually from a leopard. They're also the most smartest, the most intelligent. But this happens when you dedicate your life like Roy's completely to them. They're like kids.
At that point in time, their act was just a segment in a bigger performance, so there were a whole bunch of other performers backstage. One of the other acts was an acrobatic family named the Seven Alexanders, and the youngest member of that group, Sean Stanek, found himself backstage with a loose leopard one day.
And I saw a man on his back, and I saw a leopard staring at me. He jumped my back and he just started biting me. He just started tearing at my neck and he just kept going and going and going. I fell down, blood is kind of spurting out my neck and doors are being slammed. And my mom grabbed my arm and she started dragging me and she was punching the leopard in the face as it was on my neck.
I was screaming so hard, calling for God to help me, give me the strength.
The leopard bit into me 14 times. So I had puncture wounds going all the way up halfway to my head and down my neck. Besides my mom saving my life, the only reason that I did not die that night is because they declawed the leopard. As it was chomping down on me, his instinct was to pull and bite and pull and bite. And if he had claws, he would have got to my heart. I would have been dead. It's not the animal's fault. You know what I mean? To be honest with you, I really feel sorry for them. They're taken out of the wild. They're not in their nature and their environment. Of course, they're going to be freaked out, you know?
The family sued, and part of Siegfried and Roy's defense was that the family allowed Sean to work in this hazardous environment, so they, Siegfried and Roy, should not be liable. The family ended up getting $74,000 from that lawsuit, but 1/3 of that money had to go to attorney fees, and because of the incident they were also let go. The attack may have put a stop to Sean's family working, but it certainly did not put a stop to Siegfried and Roy expanding their collection of big cats. They soon had a collection of 10, and one of those was a male African lion named Leo. Leo was difficult to train, and in their biography they revealed that Leo once broke off his chain and ran into the kitchen of the venue they were performing at. They were eventually able to get Leo to somewhat cooperate during the act. For it, he would be inside his cage and would be very territorial of it and would bellow and swipe at anyone who came near it. But that worked in favor of their show because it created a lot of excitement for the audience. But in 1979, during one show, they unveiled Leo's cage and there was no reaction from him. And since Leo's aggression was a big part of the show, they needed him to do something. So Siegfried aggravated him to the point where he took a big bite out of his arm and hand.
You had a chunk of your arm taken out by a lion, right?
It was not a chunk, it was just
33 stitches?
It was a nip, yes. But what happened, it was sometimes, you know, you forget.
What did you do?
How far you can go. I went in the wrong moment into his...
He overstepped his territory.
But that wasn't the only time their big cats didn't follow the script.
She jumped me. She was laying on top of me. I was buried under 480 or 500 pounds. And before she could do what she was thinking, I was doing what I was thinking. A bit in the nose. She was startled. She jumped up. She looked at it, and I said, which means it's cool, it's all right, no bad feelings, it's okay, you know. And she went back. We never talked about it anymore.
A cameraman ran right in front of the animal, and of course that scared the hell out of them. Yeah. So the tiger jumped right in the middle of the extras in the audience. Roy on top of him. I had to jump right into the audience too. My procedure was to calm down the audience, and Roy talked with the tiger. Like, it's all right, it's cool, you did all right, don't worry about everything. And so I talked with the people, don't worry about everything is cool, everything is fine. Just walk up slowly, very slowly, and walk out the exits.
All right. Oh. Get him all. Oh, man. Come on. Yeah. It's all right. Get him all. Oh. Get him all. Oh. There. See, now I should do my trick, bite him in the nose. So what can you do when a 600-pound tiger lays on you and you're pinned down? All right, well, I had to be first, so I bit in the nose. But that's what I mean when you talk about instinct. You without thinking, you're just doing it.
In 1978, they began performing at the Stardust, which had a bigger stage and more amenities, so they were able to add bigger and different animals to their act. They got Gildah, a wild-caught Asian elephant who they could incorporate into their disappearing act. According to the Asian Elephant Stud Book, Gildah's birth year and even her year of capture was totally unknown. All that's really known is that she was first purchased by the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus and lived in Venice, Florida in 1972. Until she was purchased by Siegfried and Roy a few years later. But they guessed she was born in 1948, and even though they were amassing a pretty big collection of exotic animals, they still wanted more. They wanted their act to be more unique.
And I thought, in show business, you don't have to be only good, you have to be different. And Roy brought the difference.
A way of setting themselves apart from other acts that included animals was not only to have tigers, but to have white tigers. At that point in time, they were very, very rare, and the only place that had them for sale in the United States was the Cincinnati Zoo. And the only reason white tigers were in the position to be for sale was because in 1951, a male white tiger was caught in India. He was named Mohan, and every single white tiger in captivity originates from him. One of his daughters, named Mohini, who also turned out to be white, was gifted to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. in the United States in 1960. And the public absolutely loved Mohini. She was a massive draw card to the zoo. The zoo even made her their logo for a period of time. Since she was so loved, they decided to try and get more white tiger cubs out of her. They purchased a male tiger from India named Samson. He was orange in appearance but carried the white gene. He was also her half-brother and uncle, but that did not stop them from breeding. Mohini had 2 litters of cubs to him, which came to a total of 5 cubs, but only 2 survived. A orange male and an orange female. But then Samson died, so Mohini was bred with her son. From that breeding, she gave birth to an orange male and a white female. The male died after 48 hours, and the female, who was white, lived. The white tigers had to be inbred to ensure the continuation of the white gene, which is a genetic mutation, not a separate species. This was known at the time, but not widely acknowledged. Siegfried and Roy certainly didn't acknowledge it. They referred to white tigers as royal white tigers, and white tigers without their stripes as snow white tigers, suggesting that they were totally separate species.
Out of concern for the continuance of this species, Siegfried and Roy secured the offspring of this beautiful pair and established their own royal white tiger breeding line, and their offspring will be the white, thus ensuring the survival of the species for centuries to come.
Today, Las Vegas is the capital in the world of the white tigers because we have 27 white tigers and 5 snow white ones.
And they were able to get their hands on these kinds of tigers because as soon as the National Zoo was able to create another white tiger, other zoos wanted to get their hands on them. One of those zoos was the Cincinnati Zoo, but there was no price the National Zoo was willing to sell their white tigers for. But the Brookfield Zoo offered them a different deal. They didn't want to buy one outright, but offer their male Bengal tiger to mate with Mohini or one of her white or orange daughters. While the Bengal tiger didn't carry any white genes, his new bloodline was hopefully going to strengthen the genes while also giving the possibility of creating white cubs. Even as early as the 70s, there were concerns around the inbreeding. They had a less than 50% survival rate, and they were starting to notice birth defects. The Brookfield Zoo's tiger ended up mating with one of Mohini's daughters, and she gave birth to 6 orange cubs, and all but one of them died. They still wanted to keep trying, but in 1973, the National Zoo decided to do some renovations and needed somewhere to store their tigers. So they sent the Brookfield Zoo tiger back to Brookfield, and then shortly after sent Mohini and her white daughter to the Brookfield Zoo as well. And there they were going to continue to try and create more white tigers using a tiger that was unrelated to them. Then the National Zoo sent their 3 remaining tigers to the Cincinnati Zoo, the zoo that was interested in buying a white tiger from them. But the tigers they sent were not white. They were orange in appearance but did carry the white gene. There was 1 male and 2 females. Deborah Kleiman, the manager of captive breeding programs at the National Zoo, told the author of Zoo 2000, published in 1984, that she specifically told the Cincinnati Zoo not to breed the tigers, and the Cincinnati Zoo ignored her request and did it anyway. They promptly bred the sisters and brother together. From that breeding session, one of the females gave birth to 3 white cubs and 1 orange one, but all of them were cross-eyed. Unfortunately, the father to those cubs died shortly after, but the zoo was able to find another male white tiger at a circus. He was still related to them, but he wasn't as closely related. The circus agreed to a breeding loan with the Cincinnati Zoo, and they promptly started to pump out inbred litter of cubs after inbred litter. They began selling and loaning their white tigers to zoos all over the country and all over the world. The zoo director at the time, Edward Maruska, said that they increase attendance everywhere they go, and that they are footing the bill, and he would get run out of town if he got rid of the white tigers. So he kept going. The National Zoo soon realized they had inadvertently created a monster and wanted no part in it. When their renovations were done, instead of taking the white tigers back, they decided to wash their hands of them. Mohini was growing old and they decided to euthanize her. They allowed the Cincinnati Zoo to purchase Mohini's daughter that had been breeding for them, and they shipped the other female tiger they owned to another zoo. The Cincinnati Zoo continued to breed them, and if anyone wanted a white tiger, they had to go to them. And that was exactly what Siegfried and Roy did. But by that point, the tigers were so inbred, some of them were being born without their stripes.
And
now what's the difference in a white and a snow white?
Well, Mother Nature wanted to show Siegfried and Roy she's a better magician. She disappeared the stripes.
Edward Maruska did apparently have some reservations about selling to Siegfried and Roy, but he ultimately allowed them to purchase some in 1982.
There was nothing in me that wanted to sell an entertainer tigers. But I was pretty impressed at Roy's commitment, his dedication, and certainly the care he could provide. I mean, when he talked about bringing in white tigers, he talked about building an Olympic-sized swimming pool for the cats, air-conditioned quarters. So I took a gamble and I sold them a pair of tigers.
Siegfried and Roy purchased a litter of 3 cubs for $125,000. There was a male and a female for $60,000 each, which were white with black stripes. But there was also another female cub who was completely white that they named Sitara, who the zoo just added on for an extra $5,000. The price was so cheap because the zoo believed that a totally white tiger, because they were so inbred, would be sterile. But to Siegfried and Roy, that did not matter, because all that mattered was that they were different and that they would help improve the show. And the big cats certainly did improve their show, because they were bringing in loads and loads of money. They were able to buy 2 properties, one with a mansion on it called the Jungle Palace, and then a separate 80-acre property for the big cats and elephant to roam around on and have more space, which they called Little Bavaria.
Our dream is actually to create another Garden of Eden.
While they allowed their animals to roam free on these properties from time to time, they did have enclosures. The one place they liked to go when they were roaming was the swimming pool. So Siegfried and Roy decided to add a fake ice cave alongside it for it to be more on brand for their Snow White white tigers. One of the people working on that ice cave was a man named Charles Flannery, and nearby was Roy with a tiger on a leash. But Roy lost hold of that leash and the tiger attacked Charles.
I picked up my tools and I was going home. I just walked by it. It was laying underneath the tree, which was a mistake.
He walked past the tiger named Magic. When he looked away,
I didn't hear anything, but I felt a hot breath on my neck. And I hollered for Roy at that time. And that was it. After that, I was out.
the tiger latched on to the back of his neck.
The bite marks were on his carotid arteries. The teeth went into both sides. They severed his left carotid artery, and they punctured his right carotid artery. So the teeth, the tiger knew exactly where to put his teeth.
Flannery spent the next 2 months in a coma, 6 months total in the hospital.
They didn't think he was going to make it, but then they said, they did tell us that they thought he might be paralyzed.
The stagehand has been wheelchair bound ever since.
I was happy I survived, that's all.
Leo the lion, the one who attacked Siegfried, also escaped at one point and ate the neighbor's poodle. As compensation, they paid for the construction of a tall concrete wall around her property, and they also purchased her home and allowed her to live in it until she passed away. There weren't only big cat issues on the property, but also off the property. In 1987, they were doing press in New York to promote the shows they were doing in Las Vegas, and doing that press tour, they brought a couple of white tigers with them. By that point, they had already been breeding the tigers they got from the Cincinnati Zoo, and Sitara, the totally white tiger, turned out to be far from sterile, and ended up being the most prolific breeder.
This is the rarest tigress in the world. There are only 5 snow white tigers in existence. And a few weeks ago, she made history because never a snow white tigress has conceived baby one.
And she was the one who birthed the 2 tigers they brought to New York. They were being held in a rental truck on the west side of Manhattan. But the tigers and the truck vanished. A citywide search began for these tigers. Roy spoke to the news, totally devastated that his tigers had been stolen.
Today, Siegfried and Roy's tigers disappeared. Here's the thing though, guys. It wasn't magic.
This day has begun miraculous. It has begun with a nightmare.
How their truck was stolen with 2 live tigers inside.
I don't think of the animals as an animal. I think this is part of my blood.
But 5 hours later, the tigers were found in the truck that had been abandoned in the Bronx. The New York Times coverage revealed that these 2 tigers weren't just stopping by in New York for press, they were also on their way to Germany. The very next day, they were scheduled to arrive at Phantasialand in Brühl, Germany, which is a theme park and hotel. Siegfried and Roy were loaning them a pair of sibling tigers for them to breed, and throughout the years they returned to this place to collect the baby tigers. And they needed more and more tigers because every year their act was getting bigger and bigger. Things came to a climax in 1990 when they received a $57.5 million guarantee to perform for 5 years at a new hotel and casino called the Mirage. And there they weren't just putting on a show with them and their animals anymore. It was a whole production. Their new show at the Mirage took a cast and crew of 250, and it was a huge hit.
There's some extraordinary statistics about this group. Since opening at Mirage in 1990, they have sold out at a rate of 104% capacity for every show. That's at $90 a seat. For 8 straight years, they've drawn 15,000 people a week, 700,000 a year, have been seen by over 30 million people live in Las Vegas. Their gross receipts over the last 9 years, more than $500 million. Forbes magazine reports Siegfried and Roy, the highest paid entertainers in Las Vegas history, earning an estimated $58 million, 96-97, and they have an estimated net worth of more than $100 million.
Wow.
How do you explain it to yourselves?
It's unexplainable, really. I mean, that sounds wonderful. I feel we are only as good as our last show, and that's always has been our philosophy in life.
There was already a dolphin exhibit at the Mirage since 1990, but in 1997, they started a zoo called the Secret Garden, where it would house a number of Siegfried and Roy's animals. It contained a range of big cats, as well as Gildah the elephant, which could be viewed at any time for free. By 1999, the show had grossed $500 million, and they were the highest paid entertainers in Las Vegas. In 2001, they signed a lifetime contract to continue at the Mirage. It was clear they were not going to be going anywhere anytime soon, and so they needed more big cats for their show. They had been increasing their white tiger population pretty significantly by breeding their own, but by also occasionally purchasing them from elsewhere. At their most, they had 53 tigers. Sitara, the white tiger, gave birth to 12 of the 17 cubs born on their property. They became the biggest privately owned white tiger breeding operation.
This is a happy day for Siegfried and Roy.
With this 5 brand new white tiger baby cats, we are very proud to let you know that Las Vegas is today the white tiger capital of the world.
Because before Roy, there was no white tigers anymore. There was extinct, you know. Now you have hundreds all over the world.
But Edward Marushka, the once director of the Cincinnati Zoo, wasn't too thrilled with that. He told the Apple podcast Wild Things that he never would have sold them the tigers had he known they were going to breed them.
If I had to do over what I did by providing them tigers, I obviously would not. And I would not have dealt with them if I had known they were going to expand the number of animals they use.
Siegfried and Roy's seemingly impressive feat of breeding the white tigers got the attention of the South African president at the time, Nelson Mandela. He endorsed a breeding program of not white tigers, but white lions between the Johannesburg Zoo and Siegfried and Roy. The Johannesburg Zoo originally got their white lions from the Timbavati region of South Africa, and that zoo gave them 3 male white lion cubs that were descendants from the lions in that area. They named one Madiba, which is the tribal name for Nelson Mandela, and the white lions that Siegfried and Roy got handed were the only ones in the Western Hemisphere. Since they were all male, the plan was to breed them with standard African lions in the hopes of getting white lion cubs. But that wasn't really Siegfried and Roy's style. They didn't want to hope to get some white ones, they wanted to make sure they got white cubs. So they found an animal dealer in Japan that specialized specifically in white animals. It was called South North Trading Inc. in Yuka, Saito, Japan. The animals there lived in horrible conditions, but that did not change how much they were worth. The big cats would sell for $80,000 to $100,000, but Siegfried and Roy would always pay far above that to ensure that they always got the first pick. So they got their white lion females and started making white lions. But even though a number of their white lions were from Japan, they always said that they were all from Timbavati.
Enter Siegfried and Roy. The masters of the impossible have come forth to pioneer the preservation of the white lions of Timbavati, seeking the same unparalleled success they have achieved in the resurrection of the royal white tigers of Nevada.
And of course, we be known for the white tigers, but these are white lions. These are the white lions of Timbavati, and there's only a handful still in existence, and we have now 5 of them.
Another time they didn't tell the full truth was with their tiger Montecore. They purchased him from the Guadalajara Zoo in Mexico in 1995, and Roy has said that Montecore was born dead and that he resuscitated him. But the zoo director at the time told the Apple podcast Wild Things that did not happen.
No, I can assure you that this was not true. I was there and I can assure you that this was not the case.
And was the birth eventful? Was it uneventful?
It was smooth and uneventful, yeah. We didn't have any problems.
Then when Montecore injured Roy, a narrative was spun that Montecore was actually helping Roy. Soon after the attack, Siegfried and their manager claimed Montecore was helping him.
Montecore was helping save his friend to take him to safety. That's it. This is not an attack. This was not a mauling. This was Montecore taking his friend to safety.
Not everyone agrees with Siegfried's explanation of what happened on stage. Some animal experts say the bite to Roy's neck was not an act of protection, but an intentional effort to harm or kill. News 3's Steve Krupe is live at UMC tonight. And Steve, both Siegfried and Roy have told people not to blame the tiger.
They sure have, Kim. Just moments after the attack, Roy was able to actually speak a few words before he was taken to the hospital, and he told people around him not to harm Montecore. But now there's some real disagreement among animal experts as to exactly what the tiger was trying to do. Over the past 24 hours, Siegfried has appeared on all the major news networks telling the world the tiger was protecting Roy, not attacking him. But others aren't so sure, like Jonathan Kraft, who takes care of big cats at the Keepers of the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Arizona.
I have never, ever seen an animal bite an individual or another animal, for that matter, out of trying to protect them. And I've taken a few bites myself.
Kraft says if stagehands had not intervened last Friday night, Roy would be dead.
The tiger would have probably drug him to a secluded area and finished the job. That's what tigers do.
I think it might have got mad and just kind of wanted to be left alone, but I don't think it was going to fully attack him.
It could be the way they say, you know, they're trying to protect him, but didn't know. The tiger don't know his own strength, grabbing his body like that, which supposedly what they're saying was pulling him to safety.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's just a wild instinct. I think that was the bottom line. I'm sure the tigers were comfortable with him, but maybe they were agitated for some reason. In the show, not feeling well, you know, something going on maybe behind the set, who knows. Right. But I don't think it had anything to do with him trying to save him.
Regardless of what the tiger intended, officials at the Mirage say Roy's wishes will be followed. The cat will not be harmed in any way.
So he took Roy and put him backstage behind the curtain.
To protect him.
To protect him. And then he let Roy go, and he went back.
He let him go by himself.
But Montecore far from let go because he wanted to. When he dragged Roy backstage, he was taking him to his holding cage, which is a space the big cats are very territorial over. And the animal handlers knew that if Montecore got Roy in that cage, he would not let Roy go. So animal handler Chris Lawrence grabbed Montecore by the tail and pulled, while his supervisor formed a fish hook shape with his forefinger and middle finger and jammed it inside Montecore's cheek and pulled. That caused him to release Roy's body from his mouth, but another stagehand set off a fire extinguisher to force Montecore away from Roy's body. Staff members did the best they could to stop the flow of blood.
There was a major gash here in his throat that I plugged with my left hand.
Roy ended up surviving this attack, but he did clinically die 3 times. He suffered a stroke while in hospital, had paralysis on his left side, a crushed windpipe, and brain swelling. A piece of his skull was removed and sewn to the inside of his stomach to keep the bone marrow alive. Eventually his swelling went down and the piece of skull was returned. When he recovered enough to start doing interviews, he gave his version of events of how the attack happened. He said he had a stroke and fell, and then Montecore was bringing him to safety like a mother tiger would to her cubs.
So you think that he picked you up, as tigers do, their cubs?
With the cubs, yeah.
And was bringing you to safety at the side of the stage?
Right.
And that he saved your life because you think you were already having a stroke?
Yeah.
To Carol Baskin, a big cat expert, that is the last thing Montecore would have been doing.
The whole notion that he was trying to protect Roy and that he was carrying him to safety, he's a male. They don't do that. They don't carry their cubs. That is not how tigers behave. They never rescue you or save you from anything.
And Roy saying that Montecore saved his life was just a big slap in the face to all of the people who did actually save his life, like all of the stagehands and animal handlers. Siegfried and Roy also previously said they never had any issues with big cats hurting anyone, and that was also a big slap in the face to all of the people their big cats had severely injured.
They said that nobody got bit, but they upset me because that was not true. They were being dishonest.
and they're being interviewed by Larry King.
Have you ever had them run into the, you must have had accidents.
What? And they go, no, nothing's ever happened.
No, actually, we have been very fortunate. We had no...
You know, you just put your head down and you go, wow, really? Really? You're gonna do that? You're gonna lie like that?
But because Siegfried and Roy so steadfastly denied anything going wrong with the big cats, the initial impulse of law enforcement when the investigation about the attack began was that there had to be something else going on. There had to be more going on than just a tiger doing something that a tiger does. Counter-terrorism investigators were assigned to the case. According to the investigation, there was a belief that someone may have used a dog whistle or a laser light to try and provoke Montecor into attacking. In the report, there was also an email included from guest services of the Mirage asking to check the cameras because it could be the work of a terrorist wanting to target a high-profile person. But it wasn't long before all of those theories were quashed. The investigators conducted interviews with witnesses and staff members.
The tiger started walking away from Roy.
There was some sort of commotion between the tiger and Roy. Something happened.
The tiger reached around to the right and grabbed his right wrist. I saw that. And I immediately thought that didn't look too good.
Tiger then just locks onto Roy's right arm.
Kind of nipped at his hand. He smacked at it.
And then Roy started tapping him on the snout or the head with the microphone.
The sound was just, I remember just being so loud. Pow, pow, pow.
Roy started taking the microphone, just started whapping the tiger on the head.
At that point, the tiger swatted out Roy. You know, there was a little bit of commotion between him and the tiger.
They're both down on the ground, and he's still holding him, and he's still hitting the tiger on the head.
It happened so quick. It just happened so quick. The next thing, this tiger had him by the throat, and just, it was like a rag doll.
We thought it was part of the show. Then we just noticed him pounding with his microphone on the tiger like so hard.
Before you knew what happened, boom, right up into his neck and shoulder area right here, and just dragged him off stage.
And the Mirage volunteered their security camera footage before the police even asked for it. It didn't show anything out of the ordinary, and the attack was ruled as an accident. And that was that, but things were not that straightforward when it came to the US Department of Agriculture's investigation. The USDA had to do an investigation because animals were involved. They enforced the Animal Welfare Act, so they had to make sure there were no breaches of it. Steve Wynn, the creator of the Mirage, and Siegfried and Roy's manager Bernie first decided to go with the narrative that Montecor was distracted by someone in the audience with a beehive hairdo.
Montecor got distracted, Roy got distracted. I don't believe that this was an attack. I don't believe that Roy was mauled.
For whatever reason, Montecor was fascinated by a woman with a big hairdo. Down on all four, puts his face over 4 inches from the woman and looks at her. The woman thinks this is part of the show and thinks how adorable. Montecor's head is 26 inches wide. Roy is talking and sees this move, and he sees the woman reach up to give Montecor a rub under the chin. That's way wrong all the way around. He, as usual, the heroic fellow that he is, he jumps in between the woman and the tiger.
But the USDA determined there was no one in the audience with a beehive hairdo. They even contacted the person who was supposed to have been sitting in the spot where the hairstyle was allegedly sighted, but that person never had that hairstyle. So the USDA needed the footage to see what exactly happened. The Mirage Hotel, who had the video footage of what exactly happened, weren't as forthcoming with the USDA as they were with the police. They would not give them the footage. The USDA sent a subpoena to Siegfried and Roy's lawyer to force him into handing over the tape. The lawyer was not happy in his response and basically said he did not have the tape. A subpoena was then sent to Siegfried and Roy's manager, Bernie Human, as well. hospital, and Bernie's lawyer responded saying that he did not have the tape. A subpoena was then sent to the Mirage to get them to hand over the tape, and they responded by sending the USDA a CD. On that CD was some footage of what happened that night. It was just a few seconds of Roy being dragged away by Montecore, but not the actual attack. The senator at the time, Harry Reid, who was originally from Nevada, threatened to introduce legislation that prevented the release of the tape.
I had never had a senator or congressman interfere in any of my investigations up until the Siegfried and Roy investigation, and as far as my knowledge, it has never happened again.
Harry Reid protected them. This whole town protected them. And why? Because they brought in millions of dollars. They were the darlings of the Strip. Other people did a really good job hiding everything that they could hide.
So everyone involved was defying the USDA, and a high-up politician even came through to defend Siegfried and Roy. After the attack, their act had been cancelled, but they still had a brand that brought thousands of people to Las Vegas. They had so much merchandise. They had tiger plushies for every tiger, puzzles, t-shirts, and they still had their zoo at the Mirage, which was bringing in heaps of tourists. If they were found at breach of the Animal Welfare Act, they may not be able to exhibit their animals there anymore, and they were already receiving pressure from animal advocates.
In fact, I was going to ask you if you get a lot of grief from animal rights activists for using animals in your show. But you guys are very strong conservationists.
No, actually not at all, because the animal rights groups and we are doing something together. What we are creating is an awareness. These are the ambassadors of the ones who used to be around.
Even though they claimed animal activists were on their side, they definitely were not. One thing animal activists took issue with was something that Roy said in an Esquire magazine interview in 2000. He said, "Women and tigers are exactly alike. They have the same temperament, emotions, and vulnerabilities. They must be spoken to softly, but it doesn't hurt to carry a big stick just in case." I was only able to find one piece of footage where they are keeping tigers in line with a stick, but it does further confirm that they do use a stick to discipline them in some capacity, despite them saying they only train them with affection.
You mentioned something called affectionate training. What is that?
Just with love and understanding. You see, now he behaves himself so he gets a little bit bite and something. So they know exactly, they learn how to behave, and when they behave good, they get a reward.
Animal advocates were also really concerned about their elephant Gildah. As early as 1989, issues were being raised. Siegfried and Roy performed at the Radio City Music Hall, and people picketed because of the use of Gildah.
So the people who protest the use of animals in this manner, well, Jack Hanna said the other night, and so did Tippi Hedren.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, when we performed Radio City Music Hall, and before the show opened up, they came up and they picketed, and then they come in to see the show, and then they realize.
Yeah, all you got to do is see the show.
But they really didn't realize, like Siegfried said, because after the performance, an article was written in the New York Times about what Gildah went through. It said she was chained up in a van, not much bigger than her, so she was unable to sit down and had restricted access to water. She was throwing her head up and down in a constant, neurotic manner. Her handler was also seen using a stick with a hook on the end of it. Julie Wignall, the animal behavioral expert at the Mirage's zoo, told the authors of The Secret Life of Siegfried and Roy how the Tiger Kings tamed Las Vegas, that she told Roy it wasn't good to have just one elephant. But he told her that he was all the companionship Gildah would need. Eventually he did buy other companions for Gildah, but they were not other elephants. They were chickens and turkeys. The singer Pink even urged Siegfried and Roy on her website to retire Gildah to a sanctuary, but unfortunately she only got to retire when Roy was attacked and only spent a couple of years in retirement because in 2005 she passed away. Gildah was buried on the Little Bavaria property because there were no crematoriums big enough to fit her. The animal rights group PETA also demanded for the outcome of her necropsy to be released, but that never came to fruition. PETA also sent a fax to Roy's hospital room telling him to retire their tigers to a sanctuary. They also urged people to send letters to the Mirage and the USDA to retire the animals. And they also wanted Siegfried and Roy to build a sanctuary for the big cats. So with all the pressure being put on them by animal advocates and PETA, if the USDA uncovered something that breached the Animal Welfare Act on that tape, it could have been the final nail in their coffin. But even though everyone was being difficult about giving up the tape, the USDA was not going to conclude their investigation until they got their hands on it. So they eventually came to a compromise. The Mirage was willing to show the USDA investigator the footage, but was not willing to give them a copy. The investigator in charge spoke to the Apple podcast Wild Things about what he saw, and it wasn't anything too surprising.
I felt like Manticore was scared and didn't know what actually he had done, but in reality, Manticore was a tiger, a wild animal, and that's what he did. He became a wild animal at that time. He didn't want to perform that night. It was a tiger being a tiger.
Why do you think they went to so much effort to not let you see the tape?
I don't have a clue.
After that, over a year since the attack, the investigation was finally closed. But the outcome of the case was pretty much inconclusive. There was no official determination of what set off Manticore. They did, however, issue a letter of non-compliance to Siegfried and Roy's production company for not having a barrier to protect the audience from the big cats. But the warning did not carry any penalties. In the year prior, the USDA had conducted 4 inspections and never once brought up the issue of there not being a barrier. And PETA actually uncovered that USDA members had received free tickets to see Siegfried and Roy's show. PETA believed that this was a bribe and possibly why they hadn't been cited sooner. Once that was discovered, the USDA members who had received the free tickets were required to pay for them. One person who is still paying for what happened the night of the attack is animal handler Chris Lawrence. He has been suffering with PTSD ever since. In 2019, he spoke about what happened that night and how things took a turn for the worst when the routine between Roy and Manticore broke.
The point that I realized that things were kind of going sideways was when Roy turned Manticore around and he ended up with his face in Roy's midsection.
Lawrence, who was just a few feet away off stage, says he could see the cat become confused and irritated, knocking Roy to the ground. First reported by The Hollywood Reporter, Lawrence says Roy made several mistakes that he believes were critical.
I think his actions in trying to possibly save the routine or rectify the situation actually ended up complicating it.
And Siegfried has previously mentioned how if a routine is broken, then an accident can happen.
When you're on stage, they all get in a certain routine. If you change the routine and the pattern, you can have an accident, just like with people. They get confused. But Roy has been very good in control.
On top of that, Chris did an interview with The Hollywood Reporter and said that at that period of time, Roy wasn't spending as much time with the cats and was just using them as props. And one of Roy's own cardinal rules for maintaining a relationship with the cats was to spend a lot of time with them.
And you have to form a bond. It's sort of being 24 hours around with them, being there in every need of any moment.
Around this time, Siegfried and Roy were involved in the making of a Family Guy-esque animation series on NBC. It included them as characters, but was told from the perspective of their animals. Each episode reportedly cost $2 million to make, and while the attack caused the release of it to be pushed back a number of times, cancellation was never on the table. Even as Roy was fighting for his life in hospital, Siegfried and their manager were promoting the show.
Siegfried and Roy have been collaborating with our friend Jeffrey Katzenberg at DreamWorks.
What are you going to do with DreamWorks?
DreamWorks, we signed the contract. We're going to have The Father of the Bride, which starts, it's a television series on NBC.
Yes. Have you seen any of it?
Yes, we've been intricately involved in the creative process. You know, Jeffrey has had us by his side through the entire process.
So it makes sense that helping to create this animated series that ended up getting cancelled after 13 episodes did take up Roy's time that would have otherwise been spent bonding with the big cats. And it does seem like Roy did have some kind of bond with the cats that was unique to him. Regardless of how impossible it is to tame a wild animal, many people did witness a unique connection Roy had with his big cats.
It's almost a magical quality, and that occurs with Roy. I've seen him move with cats almost like he was a cat himself. He does things with cats that I would recommend that no one else tries. He almost has a oneness with animals, and that's a hard thing to describe, and I've seen that in very few people.
He has an innate ability with the animals that not many people in this world will ever.
Roy hat diese Gabe. Da gibt es überhaupt keinen Zweifel.
Roy has a gift.
Hat diese Gabe.
He has a gift.
You know, in the morning, when Roy goes and takes a shower, everybody is waiting when they know he is coming any minute. And it goes from the house cats to the dogs, to the tigers. Everybody is waiting. When I go up, nobody cares.
Julie Wignall, the animal behavior expert from the Mirage, also said that all of the big cats at the Mirage Zoo would get excited when Roy was around. So I really don't think that it's too far-fetched to believe that he did have a special bond with them. And that bond between him and Montecore broke. But I don't think it broke when Montecore attacked him. I think it was already broken. It's interesting they made the attack sound like Montecore was saving Roy, like their bond had never broken, so maybe the way they framed it was more about them covering up what the real issue was. At the end of the day, it's something we'll never know for sure. Then in 2009, they did a one-night-only charity benefit show. They did the show similar to how they previously did it, and brought a tiger out on stage. They said Montecore was that tiger, but it was not. It's believed they said it was Montecore to make it seem as though they were still best of buddies. Montecore later passed away in 2014, Roy died in 2020 from COVID-19, and then Siegfried died the following year in 2021 from pancreatic cancer. Their homes were also totally demolished, and a block of apartments is set to be built on the Little Bavaria property where Gildah's body is buried. At the time of their deaths, their big cats were still being housed in the zoo at the Mirage. There were 11 big cats left, which consisted of white lions, white tigers, and leopards. The Tigers in America Rescue helped rehome them to various sanctuaries. And that is pretty much everything for this video. And I just want to say another big thank you to Free Cash for sponsoring this video. You can try it by clicking the link in the description box, pinned comment, or by scanning the QR code on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and let's take a moment of silence for all of the big cats and people who suffered because of Siegfried and Roy. And I will see you in my next video.